people really don't like certain mental health conditions or disorders. And also, I'm going to be real with you, like the online left is super fucking ableist when it comes to people with personality disorders. And I do want to eventually talk about that. I don't know that I'm going to get into that tonight. I might like touch a little bit on it when we actually do the discussion, but my plan is to kind of like make that its kind of own dedicated discussion. So I wanted to talk a bit about this. I talked last time on the last stream about kind of the mental health stigma and kind of discussing a little bit of how people will both kind of go on to the extreme of treating mental health awareness as if it's something that only affects like depression and anxiety, and also treating for some reason on the opposite end, trying to oversell mental health, like the normalization of mental health as being something that it's not. And to kind of continue that discussion a little bit, I wanted to talk a little bit more about personality disorders and especially how this space kind of treats them, because it's kind of dog shit. Has anyone noticed? Because I have. So if you don't know, personality disorders like borderline, antisocial personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder have some reputations, and some of those reputations are like somewhat deserved, and then some of them really aren't. You know, there are ways in which certain behavior, certain types of behavior that manifest within, the common symptoms of personality disorders do. They're not great, and it's not great to engage in them. And there are things that, preferably we would want to work through. But that said, people live with personality disorders, and those personality disorders are typically treated in this space with a very demonizing look. I am in no way trying to imply that like anyone with a personality disorder is perfect. I'm also in no way trying to imply that there are never good reasons to like criticize the behavior of people with personality disorders. But what I am getting at is that people overstate the harm done by people with personality disorders in a way that they don't with people who don't have them. And this is really, really present in the online left. As an example, if you've followed any of the harassment campaign that I have been dealing with alongside my partners, a lot of the focus in that campaign has been on our personality disorders and the symptoms within them. And whereas, again, I'm not saying that we never make like mistakes and that we never engage in unhealthy behaviors and that there's never anything to analyze or criticize. I do think that there is a lot of over focus on those behaviors in a way that if we were somebody without personality disorders, in my case, borderline, you wouldn't see that much focus on those behaviors. The way that people treat people with personality disorders is very, very similar to the way that people treat queer people in non-queer spaces. I wouldn't say it's exactly the same thing, but it does it does tick the same vibe. Like, for instance, tell me if you've heard this one before. If somebody engages in behavior that is maybe a little bit over the top, right? Or maybe somebody engages in, I guess, like irresponsible behavior when it comes to dealing with a breakup, or maybe somebody is a little bit loud, or maybe they get a little bit too angry. Nothing that would necessarily tick abuse without a pattern. If you're somebody with borderline or with narcissistic personality disorder or antisocial personality disorder, chances are that behavior is going to be immediately called abusive in a way that it wouldn't be if you didn't have that personality disorder. People who don't suffer from them will typically be given all of the excuses, just having a bad day. But somebody with a personality disorder, there must be something more inherent, more underlying. And it's not that you have no control over your behavior, but it is a part of you that you can't like change. And people see that, I think, and get scared by it. The main overall trend that I notice among the online left, or I say the online left, it's more of like really this weird little space of people, I think, that engage in kind of like this like pseudo activist space that I really see a lot of like fucking ableism directed at people with personality disorders. Like there's a lot of talk about ableism in this community, and I think it's good to address that, but people will talk about ableism specifically towards like physical disabilities, and they'll talk about it with mental health disorders, but typically it has to do with anxiety or processing disorders or like autism or ADHD or keep going down the list of all of the acceptable disorders to have. And then finally we get to the personality disorders, and those are kind of like the evil mentally ill people. I'm not trying to say that like people with personality disorders never fuck up, and I'm not trying to say that like there is never any like there's not a way to like properly criticize someone or hold them account for bad behavior. But what I am noting is a pattern of people immediately jumping to the use of the personality disorder weaponized against the person who has it in place of any actual substantive criticism. Someone with an anxiety disorder, some know I have it, and people still treat it like it's all my fault and all on me to deal with in moments of high stress. Yeah. Well, and I mean that is the reality of dealing with like mental illness, and that's part of the discussion on mental health awareness, right? Like last stream, we talked about mental health awareness and talked about what it is and what it isn't, which is raising awareness for mental illness and raising awareness for the fact that people deal with these illnesses in all of the good and the bad ways. And it doesn't make you a bad person to struggle with those things. But what it's not is just depression and anxiety. There are like aspects of mental illness that go beyond those basic like things. But even with that, people do tend to still treat like depression and anxiety as something that is like always controllable and something that's like always your fault. I literally saw the phrase happiness is a choice today, and like there is some truth within that, but the people who often say that literally believe that like you can just choose what emotion you have at any given point. The point that I'm trying to get at is this space really does fail people with personality disorders because we are kind of like target number one. I actually remember there being discourse surrounding this a few years ago where talking on Twitter about like whether or not people with BPD are like inherently abusive or inherently like neglectful, or if they are like if they couldn't be trusted, or if they like were insane or whatever. And like I remember that discourse going nowhere because people who ostensibly are like on the side of like fighting for mental health awareness and fighting for, the rights of people who have like stigma against them would jump on this bandwagon and would like legitimately take the stance that like if you have borderline, you're like an abusive person, because they knew someone with BPD that was like untreated. And rather than seeing that as like a tragedy, they saw it as like a personal failing of the person there. And maybe it could have been, there are people with borderline who are aware of their behavior and they choose not to get treatment, and they can be abusive and they can be assholes. But statistically speaking, people with borderline are way more likely to be abused than they are to be the abuser. And I know I'm focusing on people with borderline, but like this it transcends just people with borderline. It also applies to people with NPD, people with ASPD. We can keep going down the list, right? 9 times out of 10, you are going to be treated like shit in this space because people will just assume. We should normalize the sentence, it's not anyone's fault, but it is your responsibility. Yeah, like, I'm responsible for my behavior. I wouldn't want to make the argument that, like, if I have like a borderline meltdown, that is somebody else's responsibility necessarily. Like, there are elements in which people can be like responsible for things that happen leading, like, context is key, right? Like, not every, borderline meltdown is going to happen in a vacuum, but like, my behavior is my own and I can only control mine, right? But to that token, if we could stop demonizing people who have like mental health crises just because they have the mental health condition that you don't like, that would be really fucking great. I can't even comprehend how someone who actually reads cannot understand. BPD, when you dumb it down, means someone has attachment issues. They can be clingy and are terrifying of being abandoned. They need 3 things: boundaries, reassurance, and a therapist. True. 100%. But also, like, it's worth noting that with a lot of these stuff, we are still learning a lot about how this stuff works, and we're still working on treatment for stuff. Like, it is still a growing field. It is not like entirely settled science. To that end, while there are people who do the bad things, right, and have those conditions, like, that doesn't justify the stigma against people with it. And it also doesn't mean that people can't get treatment. Like, these things don't go away, mind you, but you can get treatment and you can like learn to live with things and learn to like adjust. Am I making sense? Because I know I've been pretty all over the place. Anyway, that's kind of all I really wanted to say. Like, I don't have like a ton that I want to go into on this. I just kind of wanted to finish up the discussion from last stream and kind of talk about my feelings with regards to how people tend to treat people with personality disorders on the online left. It really is just utter dog shit. I really don't have anything else to say. I guess we can just kind of like cut the segment here. Thanks so much for watching. If you like this video, be sure to give it a like, comment, and subscribe. If you want to support my work further, consider becoming a channel member, a patron on Patreon, or donating through my Ko-fi or my GoFundMe for gender-affirming surgeries. Any help is greatly appreciated. Thank you so much.